Hollywood is the global capital of movie making, but its backstory has roots in Chicago, where a man becomes a pioneer in a new medium. Silent films aren't so silent. The accompanying keyboard track and the black and white reveal a lot of colorful characters.
The music is a very essential part of the experience.
Thomas Edison invents motion pictures, but he's no artist. He refers to his kinetoscope as a mere toy of no commercial value. It would take imagination to transform an invention into movie magic. William Selig is that visionary who takes the concept of silent films and dares to do more.
He did a lot of the firsts in film history that has kind of been forgotten.
A former magician, he has more than a few tricks when he turns a new medium into a booming industry across the country.
Everyone knows the Lumieres, they know Edison. They need to start knowing a Chicagoan who invented Hollywood, named Selig.
The World's Fair of 1893 in Chicago brings wonders to a massive audience. Thomas Edison is there to introduce movies to the world with his kinetoscope, but they are short, simple films. Still, people are captivated, especially William Selig.
People watched 30 seconds of something in a tent at a carnival and wanted more.
There were machine shops, metal shops, wood shops, set building, set design, wardrobe.
Jeff Spitz is an associate professor at Columbia College.
He saw the Lumieres had a camera that could be converted into a projector. I want that. I'm going to try to invent one like that.
The Selig Polyscope Company becomes the first movie studio in downtown Chicago. He goes by Colonel William Selig, but he isn't really a colonel. He isn't even in the military.
He started out as a vaudevillian, a magician, and had a touring minstrel show. So it was kind of a stage name that he gave himself. But he was not a colonel, though. I mean, that's definitely a piece of history. And there's a...
Jeff Look's father is Selig's grandnephew. Jeff now collects photos and relics from Selig's legacy.
I was not really aware of how big a deal he was. So yeah, now that I know all he did, I'm very proud of him.
The Tramp and the Dog is among Selig's first Chicago productions. It's less than 2 minutes long. A man steals a pie and tries to escape until a dog grabs him by the pants. It's a huge success. In 1910, Selig becomes the first filmmaker to adapt The Wonderful Wizard of Oz.
That was really at the point where I was like, oh my God, this guy was actually a lot bigger deal than I realized.
It's one of many firsts that still inspires movies of today.
Today, everyone watches cliffhangers. We're all streaming and binging cliffhangers. The very first one was made by Selig.
Jay Warren accompanies the silent films playing a century after they're made.
If you come across these cue sheets, they're absolutely hilarious because they're titled, Bad Guy Slams the Door, and then you play Bad Guy Slams the Door music for 8 bars.
At a time when computers make the magic, some people seem to appreciate this trip to the past.
What we do is try and preserve the spirit of not only the film, but the music by doing authentic, historically correct accompaniment.
Edison's patent company controls Selig and several other studios. They all pay him an annual fee for his technology. Selig and other studios eventually expand west. Actors like the weather, and filmmakers take advantage of landscapes for Western films. In fact, Selig pioneers shooting on remote locations, but sometimes those exotic places are really in a studio in Chicago. He's supposed to film Theodore Roosevelt's African Safari, until Roosevelt changes his mind and brings someone else.
Selig worked his way around that by just basically hiring somebody that looked like Teddy Roosevelt and did a jungle hunting safari at the studio and didn't really explain that this actually wasn't Theodore Roosevelt. So everybody saw this film and thought, oh, it's Theodore Roosevelt when it wasn't. So
Selig keeps a collection of wild animals. He has so many, he opens a zoo.
he built the first movie studio in Los Angeles. He's considered the first LA movie mogul.
Creative differences lead to one of Selig's actors leaving the company. Western star Gilbert Anderson joins George Spohr to create another Chicago film company, S&A Studios. Ellen Restis is part of the Spohr family.
There were 13 kids in the family, and they all had a part in S&A. As cameramen, as businessmen, as behind-the-screen actors, they were all involved.
Spohr and Anderson developed Bronco Billy and proves star power can build big business. When they're looking for comedians, they land the biggest of the time, Charlie Chaplin.
As we all know now, the stars are what we all go to see.
When Chaplin wants more money, Anderson is willing to give it to him, but Spohr disagrees.
And I don't think at the time that my great-uncle realized what Charlie Chaplin was going to become. I mean, had he known that this was going to be the golden goose later on, maybe he would have invested the money.
S&A loses more stars. Some, like Chaplin, are done with Chicago weather. Although they cannot keep their empires going, Selig and Spohr leave their marks on this new industry.
These were two men that were trying to bring the movies alive. And they had two different focuses, and yet they were both successful in different ways.
One of the reasons for music to accompany silent films was not necessarily follow the action. It was to disguise the sound of the projectors.
All part of the illusion, but no movie magic can preserve these films. They are made of nitrate, which is dangerously flammable. That's why so many of these time capsules are lost over time. Only about 15% survive. One historic film made in Chicago was recently uncovered at the National Library of Norway. The 1898 film is called Something Good Negro Kiss.
I had never seen anything like it.
University of Chicago professor Allison Field helped identify the film after it was found.
Probably the first screened kiss of Black people. It's also significant because it's remarkably uncaricatured. It's unlike anything in early cinema where we see representations of African Americans in racist, degrading terms.
Just like at the World's Fair, where crowds line up to look down at the moving pictures in Edison's kinetoscope. Today, we look down at moving pictures right in our own hands.
When you're scrolling and watching TikTok, you're seeing the earliest of motion picture strategy and business unfolding once again for a new generation.
Whatever's left of the magic can be found on the web. But to appreciate the full experience of film's early years, you can still find Jay Warren accompanying moving pictures, just as they did more than a century ago.